down as being on anxiety. So first of all, I'm feeling a little anxious faced with so many faces. And secondly, it doesn't mean that you're all supposed to now start feeling anxious yourselves. It's not. So it's really just about kind of what is anxiety, how do we notice it, and actually, can we have any control over it, or how does it sort of operate? How can we actually kind of have a little bit maybe of relief from it as well? So, well, the idea is that everything that we're experiencing, everything that goes on inside of us, everything that in some ways we kind of notice outside the outside world as well, can all be helpful for us. So it can all be parts of the ways in which we can maybe understand things, we can maybe even grow. So, we've probably all felt anxious at some times. Sometimes it's just sort of exams or something else. Maybe it's getting married. Maybe it's just sort of somehow we're not quite sure. We find ourselves in the middle of Sainsbury's frozen food aisle and suddenly just start to feel a little bit edgy. Not quite sure what's going on. But generally speaking, fairly safe to say, most people here feel anxious at some point in time. So, we like to think that if we take this as being us, then we like to think that we have nice sort of behaviours that are logical, rational, we know what we're doing and why. Behaviours based on thoughts. We know what we think about things, we know what we think about any subject, about ourselves, about people. We know all of that. It's all taken for granted. All we have to do is choose what we're going to share with anybody at any particular point in time, but we know all about ourselves. Well, that's kind of wrong. That's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, if you like. So we've got our behaviours, which is what we see in other people. We've got some of our thoughts might be known, but the thoughts then based on things like beliefs, based on things like feelings. And while some of those might be known, a large amount of them probably are just going on inside of us, and we're not really aware necessarily all the time of where they're coming from, what seems to provoke them, what seems to be happening in them. So, some of what happens maybe we're aware of, have some insight into. Say this is my head and brain. It's not necessarily to scale, or in fact with any other sort of aesthetic behind it. And the brain is made up of many different areas. We're not all entirely sure, even at a wonderfully advanced 21st century stage, how it all works. But some of the bits and pieces we do know. So, for instance, we have what happens in the hippocampus up here. So that, generally speaking, is the bit that defines us as being different from other animals, is it's more developed, it's bigger. So, for instance, our version of this is bigger than Neanderthals, for instance. We have this bit here, which is called the Prefrontal Cortex. So that tends to involve things like longer-term memories. So those people who have sort of road traffic accidents, car crash and things like that, heavy hit on the front of the head, that then can't remember certain things. That tends to be why that starts to get affected. We have, coming up here, we have the spinal column, and there are two systems that run up to a bit up here. So all the information that comes in, so sight, smell, thanks Brian, anything else that comes in, things like taste, touch. So they all come in on this spinal column system. They get compared, so the loop, the evolutionary loop, which I think Helen might be talking about later, evolution and Darwin things. So the evolutionary loop has come up from there, so very basic animals have got this sort of system. They then, as time goes on, we develop that in a sort of a cycle. So this information is then taken in. It's compared with previous memories about things. So for instance, I smell fire, I know what fire smells like, therefore I know what actions to take, and that's then sent back down the spinal column in terms of what we do. basically how the system works. So, how does this have anything to do with anxiety and feeling anxious? Why don't get them? This bit here is what's called the amygdala. Which almost fits on the paper. The amygdala is like the lizard brain, so it's like the first thing that evolved, so lizards have it, and it sits just on top of the spinal cord. What that governs is what's called the fight-flight response. So we have two systems that run down here. One's called the sympathetic system, and that activates things like dilating of pupils, doing things like that. We then have something called the parasympathetic system. That does things like slowing down your heart rate. These systems operate without us having to think about them. So when you get up, having been lying down on the couch or something like that, your blood pressure changes, and actually you would completely black out if these systems didn't effectively just kick in automatically, change your heart rate and do all sorts of things. The problem is they operate automatically and they're chemically based. This bit you have to think about. So, this bit is geared up to identify any threat that's coming in and work out what needs to happen. It's based on taking in the information, trying to make sense of it, and then working out what needs to happen. The problem is that happens over time. If the threat's pretty big, you need to work out what you need to do pretty quickly. So, you work out, is it something that I can fight? At which point you might decide to do that. Is it something that I can run away from? Then you might need to do that. So your heart rate starts to quicken, things start to happen quite quickly around it. The problem is the next bit. It's called freeze. So the fight-flight is not just fight-flight, it's fight-flight freeze. What happens with freeze is you basically play dead. So you've got either too much information coming in, or the particular information that's coming in saying you can't fight it and you can't run away from it. You've got an evolutionary system that just kicks in here. It just means that then you stop, you play dead. So lizards do it, items of prey do it. So the idea is if you're dead meat, then maybe you're not as nice to eat as fresh meat, and then hopefully the saber-toothed tiger will run away and leave you alone. Works out quite well for that situation. Works out less well when the bunny rabbit's caught in the headlights coming down the road. It can't work out what's happening or what this information is. It stops and freezes and plays dead. Unfortunately, it then goes splat. That's basically what happens when we're having a panic attack. So, we can activate this system as well. If you all just sit there at the moment, if you all just open your eyes wide and take a deep breath at the same time, how do you feel now? Anything happen in your body? A bit more wide awake, maybe got an oxygen intake, okay. So if you carry on with that, you'll end up hyperventilating, get too much oxygen in. Anything else happen in everybody's body? Start feeling anything? Any sort of tension or any sort of release? Anything like that. You might feel a little bit anxious. That's basically activating your parasympathetic system if you're doing that. So the two, you can cognitively make it happen instead of it going around the other way. So, in a short phrase, that's basically what we're trying to do. Is by you getting some control over what's happening, the system doesn't just happen of its own accord. Okay. Now, to work out whether or not you're having some of those systems, there's something you can do. Have a bit of a handout for everybody. It's like a little checklist you can do for yourselves. So just above the amygdala is another bit here, and that's called the basal ganglia. So it's the next bit that evolved after the lizard brain. And it deals with like really sort of short-term memories and things like that as well. So slightly different to this, it's more chemically based. If you've got an overactive one of those or a problem with it, there are a number of things it looks after. So sort of maybe slightly shaky hands at times, whether or not you actually feel a little bit lacking in confidence, whether or not you start to feel a little bit like you need to be performing harder and faster than everybody else. You can do a little checklist for yourself and see if you seem to have some of these symptoms. What that probably means is that you've got this has been tuned too high. Now, there could be many reasons for you in your individual case as to why that seems to be happening, but it can be something to be aware of as to what you might then want to do about it. So, the first thing to know is that if you start to feel a little bit anxious about anything in any situation, it is normal, it's natural, it's something that happens to basically take care of yourself and look after you. So no matter in what situation it's happening, it's just a natural process. So it's not meaning that you're weird, you're a freak, something's going on that's dangerous. It's actually just a natural way your body, you as an animal, look after yourself. The secret then is to try and start getting some control over it. Because what's happening is it's identified the risk that's coming in as being a threat effectively to your life. And therefore it's kicked in all these natural processes. It's not having a chance to get any of this online. If, by training some of your higher functions, your thinking, your reasoning, you start to identify more of these things as being perhaps not such a risk, then it means that these natural processes don't have to be online all the time. So you've got a management function basically that will come online instead. So, if you are having a sort of a panicky anxiety experience, just to be aware there are a couple of things to do. So this is a physiological system. So physiologically there are ways of then managing it. So one of the things you mentioned before was actually that you start to feel a little bit more energized because you're taking more oxygen if you're breathing faster. So that's what the physiology does, so then you can run away, you can fight something. If you do it too much, you're over-oxygenating your blood. So if you're a diver, you breathe in deeply so you can dive deeper. It works, it's fine. If you do it too much, you get overexcited. So one of the things that you want to do is to clap your hands, and then that actually puts carbon dioxide back into your system and starts calming you down. We all have a normal amount of carbon dioxide in our lungs at all stages. If we get that out, we start to get overexcited, we start to get too animated. So actually by doing that, you're putting carbon dioxide back into your system, you start calming down again. On the other side of the page is just a checklist of things to do when people are having a panic attack that you can then look at. So reassuring the person that it is normal and natural. Just cupping the hands, getting control of breathing, that sort of thing. Being with them. So contacting them, holding hands, something like that, so that they know that they are together and somebody is staying with them to help know that it's a shared experience. To also then not try to fight the response. So the more you're doing that, the more you're then actually, this is gearing up this physiology to keep on trying to resist something that's seen as a threat. So to effectively just kind of go with it and then kind of ride it out. That's basically what you have to do. It can take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, just stay with it. So that's basically what to do if you are experiencing a panic attack until that's there. Something else that to help have some control over it, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that you can start to visualise and start to get on function some of these thinking elements. So for instance, to almost imagine that you have a spinning wheel. And as you're having a panic attack, start to focus on your breathing and then slowing down that spinning wheel. So it gives you a sense of control over what's happening in your body. Just getting online some of this stuff here. What's then afterwards, if you've had a panic attack, panicky situation, anxiety, even just giving a presentation in front of people or whatever it might be, just to think about what it is that's being the cause of that anxiety. So, for instance, if you've had a major traumatic incident like a car crash and then you feel a bit anxious about driving, then it might be that there's one thing that seems to be causing that anxiety. It might be that you need to focus on just that one thing by sort of reprogramming it. There are things called EMDR, there are techniques like trauma-focused CBT, things like that, to try to just really address one thing that seems to be sort of implanted in you so that you get more confidence in controlling it. If it seems to be a bit more general, so you're not quite sure, there are ways of working with it. So there's something called, there's a little model down there as well that's based on, it's called the fear model. So the first idea is to have some thought over it, is to identify what seems to be, we were talking before about, for instance, some of the beliefs. What are the beliefs that maybe seem to be activated? So for instance, is it that I won't be good enough? Is it that people will be thinking about me doing the presentation or something like that? It's not going to be interesting. I'm going to get the words wrong, I get muddled up. What's my beliefs? It might be sitting below some of the actual behaviours that happen, some of the stuff down at the lower level of the iceberg. If you can identify what some of those are, maybe do like a list of 3 and see what seems to be the biggest one, the dominant negative thought. Just spend a bit of time thinking about that. And then what you can do, what seems to just come, if you effectively meditate with it, you then start to access some of the deeper areas of yourself and try and flip it around the other way. See what sort of positive statement, what sort of positive thought comes up that's maybe not the direct opposite. It doesn't have to make complete logical, conscious sense straight away, but something that gives you a better sense of what I might be instead. So flipping it round. The next stage is envisaging what that positive sense of something might be like. Staying with that. Spending some time with it. Even draw what it might look like to actually be believing it or living with it. Envisaging what that might be like. The next part is called advance. So then you actually try to work out, for instance, if there's something like giving a presentation or a driving test or something else, take like a baby step. Now you can do that literally in real life, so that's what they do when they do conditioning, sort of desensitizations, do allergies and things like that. But you can do it in your own mind as well. So you can visualise just walking out, for instance, taking hold of the car keys and sitting in the car. You can just do that in your own mind to get used to the idea, start to become less frightening. Just small steps to advance towards where you want to be. And the final stage is what's called relax. So what you actually do then is this idea that you've got, the envisagement of it, the steps towards it, is focusing, normally a month, anything will take about a month. If you spend time with it, so really focus it and get used to it, and then that becomes effectively your new pattern of thought. You've then effectively got this bit more online. So there's a quote that the synapses that fire together stay together. This bit has got the synapses, the electrical impulses. So you're taking antidepressants, that's what they often work on. They work on this bit here. SSRIs, we work on these electrical impulses. And that's what you're then reinforcing to change your belief systems and therefore maybe actually feel less anxious in some of these situations. So that tends to go away. So it's a perfectly natural system. By actually then reflecting on what seems to be going on, you get some control over it. There's a process you can go through in order to then ensure that you can actually bed those in, so it doesn't come back again. But it's important to also know what some of those triggers are, so you spend some time to actually think mentally what's going on at a deeper level. Because if you just spend time with reactions, you might change those, but it might then move on to something else. So spend time going to the deeper levels, really. But then, that should mean you are able to cope with it a bit easier, a little bit more able to do whatever it is that seems to be holding you back. and then moving into actually greater exploration of what else might be holding you back as well. Well, that's anxiety.